Rob Gilmer with the Real Football Show. Haven't done an episode in a bit, but had a lot going on. But I'm gonna start trying to get back regular. Try to have once my son gets back in a few weeks, we're hoping to have him on and like a little bit of a open discussion on what's going on with U.S. soccer, that type of thing. So in this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about the Premier League, what's going on with that, both the relegation battle and then the title race. And then next episode, we'll get into the Bundesliga and Champions League and what's going on there. I want to start with something. I did use some youth referee 2 games yesterday. Usually, I mean, I'm as frustrated as everyone with the video assistant referee bar and what's kind of happened with that. But I come back to there's certain things where I think it does a good job, and there's certain things where you're wondering, you can kind of scratch your head and go, how do they look at it? I mean, this happens very quick. These are world-class athletes that are moving very quickly. The refs as a whole are very good, but again, everything's happening quickly. That's kind of where VAR happens. There was to me, a great example in the Arsenal game last week of where VAR is helpful. Second goal for Man City versus Arsenal was initially ruled offside. Again, I think the assistant referee actually made the call that you would expect to make, because the reason it was ruled onside is the trailing foot of the defender on the other side of in this case, Stones, who scored the goal. So that, to me, was where VAR can be very helpful, and I'd like to see that part, those parts are where I think it's very good. And then on the other side of it, yesterday, in the Tottenham-Liverpool game, you have, again, these are world-class referees, I don't want to disagree with them, but what seems to be a pretty clear red card offense for Liverpool for Jota, putting his foot in a place, whether the Tottenham player moved his head down, which he did. Jota had his foot where it shouldn't have been. As a neutral to that game, Liverpool-Tottenham, I'm a Manchester City fan. You can understand where Tottenham could feel very wronged, because not only does he not get a red card, and not getting a red card, he goes on to score the goal that wins Liverpool the game. So a player that probably shouldn't have been on the field scores the winning goal. So you absolutely have to feel for Tottenham. I think the Premier League does need to look seriously at some clarification on moments like that of something that, again, I think it was fairly clear. Title race, I guess you could say it's cleared up or not cleared up, depending on how you look at it. There's still plenty of games to go. There's still plenty of games. Arsenal has a game tomorrow against Chelsea. They still, I believe, they have 5 games to go. Manchester City has 6 games to go. Anything can happen. That's one thing you can say with the Premier League is even the teams in the bottom half of the league. It's not. You can't just say, hey, because we're playing a lower team, we've got this in the bag. That's just not the case. But Manchester City at this point is a game up with a game in hand. The odds makers in England are saying Manchester City's got it in the bag again. It's not over, and it's going to be interesting to see how that comes down. But I think where you get a little bit more interesting is now you have Newcastle, Manchester United. I don't know if you remember back kind of at the beginning of the season, I had said I thought Newcastle was going to be one of those teams that's going to be, they definitely have not been considered part of that Big Six for a long, long time. With the new owners, with Eddie Howe as the manager, I personally said I think that they're really going to be, whether it becomes a Big Seven or potentially one of the teams, I guess, drops out, depending on how you look at it. But Newcastle's definitely going to be in that talk where you're going to see, hey, they're one of those teams that every year is fighting to be in the top 4. A couple good signings, and over the summer, you never know, they might be really competing for the title next year. At this point, Manchester City first, Arsenal second, Newcastle third, Manchester United fourth, but with a game in hand on Newcastle. Um, Unlikely, I guess, probably that Liverpool or Tottenham can get in and change that, but you never know. I think some of the teams of the year with the manager change at Aston Villa, they've been playing fantastic since then. Brighton is just top half of the table and have been really strong all season. Brentford as well. Fulham. Although they've dropped down to the bottom half of the top half of the table, they've still, again, they've had a great season. I think probably the real news is that we had Liverpool really struggle this year. Now they've kind of righted their ship, and obviously they're back in fifth place, but they were really struggling at the bottom half of the top half of the table. And now you still have Chelsea, who's in the bottom half of the table, and all the money they've spent, and all the players that they have under contract, and however many managers they're currently at going through so far this season, now 3. So you're looking at what's this, it's interesting. Just Manchester City gets grief for having all the money they've spent, but the other side of that is they're actually of the big 6 teams. Their net spend since Pep joined is actually at the bottom of that group. But Chelsea, who has spent a ton of money, just hasn't gotten the right mix of players in, obviously, and there's going to be a lot of commotion. Hiring a full-time manager, and then probably sometime after that, who they're going to keep, who they're going to sell off or send off to other teams. Also, West Ham is definitely still probably, they're not out of safety, but maybe out of safety for being relegated, but having been so strong last year to be in 15th place currently. And then you have underneath that Leicester, Leeds, Newcastle, not Newcastle, Nottingham Forest, Everton, and Southampton, who are all definitely in danger of being relegated. Today's tie with Leicester and Everton doesn't really, it gets Leicester City out of the relegation zone a whole differential. So it's going to be very interesting as you get to the end of this season, because a lot of these lower teams are playing have a lot of games against top teams. So they're really going to have to make they're going to have to flip the script and beat a top team to get themselves out of the relegation zone, and see kind of what happens there. But that's so it's going to be an interesting end of the season. As you go into this, you start looking at who's got as Premier League, especially this week, has a lot of midweek games to make up. So Wednesday you have Liverpool, Fulham, Manchester City, and West Ham, and Brighton and Man U, as they try to make up games that were missed earlier in the season. And then you start getting into the end of the season. So as you get to that last week of the season on Memorial Day weekend here in the U.S., you're going to have, it's going to be very interesting both at the top of the table, potentially with Arsenal, Man City fighting that out, and also definitely at the bottom of the table with these teams trying to stay up. Southampton seems to be the one team that I don't, it would take, maybe not a miracle, but it would take a lot for them to get themselves out of the relegation zone. But the rest of the other teams in that close doesn't look like it's going to go too well. You look at Leeds, who managed to change in personnel, was both as an American and with a U.S. coach who I thought was doing a good job and did a great job for Leeds last year, getting rid of Marsh. It hasn't done them any good. They haven't had any real results since they made that change. They're still battling the bottom. I think Marsh had them playing hard. Only positive, I guess, he's the biggest name, or who seems to be the leading name to take over the U.S. National team. I'd love to see that. So I think that would be the one positive that had come out of that. So it's going to be interesting, like I said, as we get into these last few weeks of the Premier League season, to see, at the bottom, which of those teams can pull that upset to get themselves out of the relegation zone. Um, can West Ham and Wolves and Bournemouth, who are kind of considered in a safe zone, is those teams below them that pull off enough points that it puts them in danger of being relegated, or will the Man City and Arsenal, both who have decent amount of team, a few games against the lower level teams, are they going to win the games you expect them to win, and keep them down there? So that's going to be interesting, I think, like I said, as we go into the next part of the season. So that's kind of my take on the Premier League for the next, as we go into the latter quarter of the season. It's definitely going to be up. Manchester City has 6 games left, so it's going to be up to them. It's in their, they have the control of their destiny, but can they win out? Arsenal, I think, I think they've really turned the table, turned the corner on the last few seasons. They gave, and here's the thing: they gave their coach a few seasons to make changes to the personnel, to get his system integrated into what Arsenal is doing, I think no way around it. I think you got to look at Arsenal's season as a success. I guess some people won't if they don't win the title, but I don't think whether they win the title or not, I think this is a successful season for them. So that's just my opinion. So again, thanks for turning to the Real Football Show. That's our take on the English Premier League over the last part of the season. Thank you.